Right, so today is a very, very, very special day. I've got the man himself, co-founder of the Cosmos Network, Ethan Buchman, here on my channel. I feel like I made it now. This is the biggest interview partner I ever had, and I'm really excited. Also because we've pivoted CryptoC more towards the Cosmos ecosystem, because I find it super important and interesting. But yeah, first things first, Ethan, thanks so much for taking the time. How's everything going in Toronto?
Thanks a lot for having me. Yeah, things in Toronto are good. I think we're opening up. It's beautiful out. Yeah.
Nice. And yeah, I mean, there's so much to cover. There's so much going on in the Cosmos ecosystem. But I thought we pivot this episode today to talk about a bit about the origin story, and then also Cosmos today, things that you could have done or would have done different if you would start from scratch again.
Yeah.
Before we get into all these things, can you give us 2-3 minutes context and background of your time before you entered the crypto industry itself?
Before crypto, BC, huh? Sure. Yeah. So I was a young man in university. I was into biology, biophysics, neuroscience, religion. In university, I started off with a double major in neuroscience and religion. I was fascinated by the problems of consciousness and culture and religion as the symbolic aspects of religion and what it has to tell us about the brain and sort of in a Jungian context. And I transitioned from that into more hardcore biology and physics and really studying the origin of life and the problem of how organisms emerge, sustainable organisms emerge in a universe that is allegedly always running down according to the second law of thermodynamics. So I was knee deep in non-equilibrium statistical mechanics and the related biophysics and so on. And eventually I found my way into machine learning. Initially, I was looking to use machine learning to address some of the data collection problems I was having. I was doing microscopy and I had all these beautiful images of cells and I needed to collect data from them. And so I was looking at using machine learning for that. And I ended up starting a master's in machine learning, trying to build parallels between statistical mechanics and statistical physics and machine learning, and then ultimately fell down the Bitcoin rabbit hole sometime in 2013, and I've been in crypto ever since.
That's awesome. Yeah. And even before I started to learn about Cosmos and everything, I read some of your documentation and your papers in very early days. Also, Vlad Zamfir, who I think is a friend of yours.
Yeah.
You guys have published papers in 2013, 2014 about proof of stake algorithms, right? And back then, I think it was something that nobody would ever have thought that would work. But you guys have actually been pioneering that space. So that's super impressive. And that's also, I think, one key starting point how Tendermint basically was born in the first place. So can you talk about the very early days in crypto, your friendship with Vlad, and also I think you guys have been on a hackathon, the two of you, and won the second place there. Can you talk about this phase back then? How was crypto back then?
Sure.
And your research efforts also in the proof of stake sector.
Sure. So Vlad and I met in a third year dynamical systems class. He was majoring in math and I was, doing biophysics and taking math courses and stuff. And I think he told me after class, he came up to me, he was like, "You're the first person I've ever seen crack up, like start laughing in a math class. Like maybe we should be friends." And, I just find the mathematical results so beautiful. I would just laugh at them when the professor derived something, wonderful on the blackboard. And so, Vlad and I went on a walk that day and, spent 2 hours talking about quantum physics and we're instant pals. I think it was a couple of years later that, so we spent a lot of time talking about, statistics and entropy and, math. And he sort of introduced me into economics and, Austrian School of Economics and these kinds of things. And we discovered Bitcoin, I think, properly sometime in 2013 and became quite enamored with it as, coming from that sort of, I guess, Austrian economic background. Of course, I've come a long way since then, but we sort of went all in with whatever, little bits of money we had back then and became pretty obsessed with Bitcoin and the power of cryptocurrencies. And I think sometime in early 2014, we stumbled upon Ethereum and, playing with very early stage Ethereum contracts and we started going to the Bitcoin meetup in Toronto, where Vitalik was making appearances, and really where Ethereum was born out of, essentially that space, the Bitcoin meetup in Toronto. And that's when we met Vitalik and other early Ethereum people, and really started to get deep into the sort of research in the blockchain space that was happening back then. And of course, those were super early days. And Vitalik, I think sometime around then, came up with the idea for Slasher, which was the sort of how to actually secure a proof of stake system. Until that point, there was this problem with proof of stake, the so-called nothing at stake problem, right? Where there's sort of no incentive, or there's no reason that you wouldn't have a million forks in a proof of stake network. And so we came up with this disincentivization scheme that came to be called Slasher. And so back in those days, we were still researching proof of work, and Vlad was coming up with was trying to come up with ASIC hard proof of work algorithms, and we were working on protocols for anticipating the problem of like, how are you going to get users to pay for smart contracts in the tokens of the smart contracts if you can only accept if the miners only accept Ether. And so we designed some protocol back then, and we called it the DAO protocol or something, to enable users to actually pay to access Ethereum contracts in whatever the native token was, rather than using Ether. And of course, there's many variations of that sort of thing now, and an explosion in flash bots and MEV and all this stuff to ways to go direct to miner. So now those were super early days. I think you can still find that paper online, the Daoist protocol or something like that. And so we were hacking on early Ethereum contracts. And in April of that year, there was a big Bitcoin conference in Toronto, and all the Ethereum folks came, and there was a big hackathon, right before the conference. And at that hackathon, we were really really into like alternative science, scientific processes, right? Really fed up with like peer review, and disenchanted with the institutional structure of science and these sorts of things. And we were very inspired by Aaron Schwartz and what he had been doing, trying to make science more accessible, and with tragic results, unfortunately. And so we had the idea of a project that we ended up calling Crypto Schwartz, which was to democratize access to peer review, so to speak. And we borrowed a concept that I think was from one of the machine learning conferences by Jan LeCun, to sort of open up the peer review process and have it be more have it more like properly incentivized and a bit more open, and really break the sort of old boys club and incentivize people to find good unknown papers sooner and stuff like that. And so we were looking to try to build that out as a protocol on top of Ethereum. So at this hackathon, we built this thing. We actually I think we forgot a computer or something when we started the hackathon, so we had to drive back to Guelph, and we went to get the computer and drove back. So we lost 3 hours or something. But so we hacked that thing together, and we were hacking on, I think it was Viper, or what was it called? Or Serpent was the early Ethereum smart contract language that Vitalik had built. And Vitalik was sitting next to me, and I would be hacking on Serpent, and there'd be a bug, and I'd go over to him and say, "What's wrong here? Can we fix this bug?" And so it was pretty messy, but we stayed up all night. But that was kind of a legendary hackathon, because some of the other people there, so Amir Taki was there, and he was up all night as well, hacking on something. I think he went up to party and came back and hacked out what he called, I think it was called Dark Market or something like that, which is then became Open Bazaar. And then the other project was a project that was called Slockit, which ended up becoming the DAO. So that was kind of so those are the three prize winners were Amir Taki's project, our project, and that Slockit project. And so each of those have a sort of interesting history. And I think us winning that or coming second or whatever in that hackathon sort of put us on the map and got us much more involved in the Ethereum space and so on.
That's awesome. Yeah, maybe if you wouldn't have forgotten the computer, you would have won the.
Maybe we would have come first. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe. But yeah, so that's so interesting. I encourage everybody also to read through Vlad. He wrote a lot of blog posts about that. Originally, I think on the Ethereum site, but now there's archives of it documenting all that with dates and how the day was and how you guys sat together there. So it's so funny to read that. I wish I was there, but well, I only joined in 2017, so that's not my time.
There was another part, which was when so this was in April of 2014, and then over the summer we were doing a bunch of work on proof of work and working with the Ethereum guys, and that's when I started hacking on Geth, and I don't think it was called Geth yet. And then in September, we were still kind of skeptical of proof of stake, and I hadn't met Jaquan yet, or really, I don't think I even knew about Tendermint, but I think around that time he started working on Tendermint. We can get into that in a minute. But in September of that year, Vlad had moved to the UK to just, be more of a nomad. He had someone funding his research. And Amir Taki rented I think there was an Ethereum meetup there. And then after the Ethereum meetup, Amir Taki was hosting some party at a squat in London. And so Vlad and I were there, and we ended up staying up all night, upstairs away from the party, just sort of brainstorming about proof of stake and anticipating all these issues. That was the night we really convinced ourselves that proof of stake was the future. That was also the night we met Vinay Gupta, who was an honor to meet, and hearing him explaining Ethereum back in 2014 to people was really
Awesome.
was really interesting. And then there was a point where Amir Taki came up and gave us shit for not coming down to the party, and he was like, "Look, guys, I know you think you're designing protocols, but you're designing protocols for people. And if you spend all your time isolated from people, you're not going to do a good job. So you better go party with these people, so you know what kind of protocols they need." And we're like, I'm here, get out of here. We're making breakthroughs on proof of stake, and this is the future, and blah blah blah. Yeah. Anyway,
that's awesome. Yeah, I love it. And see what came out of it. I mean, now I think, what is it, 95% of all chains are running on proof of stake. I mean, it is already here, right? It's not just the future, it's already
it's here for sure. Here, right? It's definitely here.
Yeah. So you already briefly mentioned Tendermint, which is the kind of consensus layer of Cosmos, and also a company, the tech arm, one of the main tech arms behind Cosmos, I would say. Can you talk about how Tendermint, and this is 2014, right, when it first came out, 2015, something like that. How does Tendermint resolve the blockchain trilemma, decentralization, security, and scalability as defined by Vitalik, I think? How does Tendermint resolve it, just on a very high level? My audience, and I'm not technical at all, so maybe if you can just explain it in simple words, that would be great.
Yeah, so Tendermint, the brilliance of Tendermint, and this was all Jay, this was sort of before I started working with him in 2014. He initially was working on some Bitcoin exchange or something, was trying to build it, and he got really frustrated with the lack of finality in proof of work, right? He was like, look, I want to build this exchange. He's concerned about all the edge cases and trying to work that out. And the fact that he couldn't guarantee finality was really sort of, really causing him problems. So he's like, all right, I'm going to go back to the literature and sort of see what's been written in the past, in the academic work about this consensus problem, right? And he ended up finding, I think the way he puts it was like the first paper he understood was this paper by Dwork-Lynch and Stockmeyer in '88. It's now called the DLS, Byzantine fault tolerance consensus algorithm. And he found this thing and really understood it and was like, hey, we can use these old classic academic protocols that are, kind of well understood and proven to solve these issues with proof of work, with the finality issue, but also these, environmental sustainability issues. Proof of work's incredibly expensive and so on. And so he started working on taking that DLS algorithm, that Byzantine fault tolerant algorithm from the literature, and using Vitalik's idea of Slasher to put together this new protocol he called Tendermint, which in the beginning was its own new proof of stake. It was a very simple kind of proof of stake cryptocurrency that was built on a robust consensus engine, this DLS protocol, but was designed very clever. He made a number of breakthroughs that it's not even clear if he was aware of the power of those breakthroughs at the time in the way he coded the thing up. It was really quite clever, because applying those old algorithms to this new model of sort of an open, decentralized, permissionless network actually took some very clever structuring of the gossip protocols, essentially. And so I guess when you think about that trilemma, I mean, I don't know how well those terms are defined. I haven't really considered it in a long time, and I'm not sure it's quite an impossibility result so much as it is just a statement of properties that you're aiming for. And so depending on how you look at it, you could consider that Tendermint, because of what it's evolved into, it's quite flexible. You could consider that maybe it could, depending on how you parameterize it, it could go different ways, right? So because Tendermint is able to support, up to at least a few hundred validators, if not more, and maybe with some more advanced cryptography, you could potentially do thousands of validators. We haven't quite gotten there yet, but probably soon. But today, the Cosmos Hub has 125 validators. We've done networks with, I think around 200 and so on. So depending on your measure of decentralization and, really what you think, probably the way decentralization is defined there is like, anyone with a MacBook or whatever can run the network. And so certainly that, so you might imagine that, well, Tendermint chooses on that trilemma that it chooses, scalability and security instead of decentralization. But you know, depending on how you define those things, you might say that it actually favors decentralization and security rather than scalability. So I'm not sure how useful that trilemma is just for looking at it as sort of a basic solution. The way we've always thought about Tendermint as really like a building block that was sort of a practical, very pragmatic solution to a very real problem of you know, finality and consensus. And if you look at, you know, pretty much every proof of stake protocol that has come since has derived in one way or another from Tendermint. So Tendermint has become this sort of like pedagogical, you know, fundamental baseline that everyone, before they design a new proof of stake thing, they're like, okay, first let's understand Tendermint. That's the simplest thing. It works really well. It's trusted. It's proven. And, you know, there's some aspect of it we don't like, so we're going to go in this direction or that direction and design a new thing. So many of the protocols that have come since have been derived in one way or another from Tendermint. And that includes, you know, Casper and the ETH2 proof of stake, and you know, Grandpa with Polkadot, and Solana's BFT consensus, and Mirrors, and so on. I think maybe the only one that isn't quite derived from Tendermint is Avalanche, which is sort of in its own camp of consensus protocols. But yeah.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that as the next question, because a lot of other white papers also, they're citing you and citing your work and Jay's work, right? Especially when it comes to designing those algorithms. You mentioned the Casper protocol. I think this was also heavily influenced by Vlad Zamfir's Highway protocol and Highway research. Then Dfinity, I think Dominic Williams, he's also been around that time. And when I read all that, and the hashgraph, right, with Dr. Lehman Bird, who developed the hashgraph algorithm, also cites your work. So it's kind of interesting for me, you know, as a guy who joined years after, to see how it's all kind of like linked together somehow, right? And everybody's taking elements from each other, adding their own flavor. And this kind of builds or establishes this multi-chain ecosystem that we're having, right? So what are your thoughts on that in general?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was obvious to us pretty early on. I think probably in you know, as early as 2014 that, you know, we were moving into a multi-chain world, and the tools we wanted to build were multi-chain tools, right? So we weren't, you know, as much as we love Bitcoin and Ethereum and some of the other projects, it was very clear that, you know, we're moving into a world where there's going to be many blockchains, and that was the right approach. And certainly they couldn't all use proof of work, and so they obviously needed, you know, not to say that there isn't room maybe for one or a small number of proof of work blockchains, sort of separate conversation, but that clearly we're going to have many blockchains, you know, thousands if not millions of them. And they would need some alternative like proof of stake, in that they didn't necessarily all need to use exactly the same system, but, you know, if they weren't interoperable in some way, that would be a bit of a failure, and that would be problematic. So we never really believed in a sort of maximalist approach, like one chain to rule them all. That didn't really make any sense, and we didn't even believe that the many different chains all needed to use the exact same, you know, underlying consensus protocols. We did believe that there was sort of a model, a generalization of consensus that many of these would fit into, and that if we could build an interoperability protocol that fit that generalization, then, you know, all these different chains would be able to talk to each other. And that was the sort of thinking that ultimately gave rise to, you know, Cosmos and the IBC protocol, the Inter-Blockchain Communication Protocol, which is essentially a generalization over the different consensus protocols that allows all these different blockchains to communicate quite seamlessly, in the same way that TCP allows, you know, many different computers, regardless of their operating system or their hardware or whatever, you know, they have a common network stack, so they can all communicate, right? So we think about it, you know, in the same way that maybe in the early days of computing, it was like, oh, that we're only going to need one computer, you know, and it'll be at the, you know, Dell headquarters or the IBM headquarters, and that computer will handle all of the world's compute, and everyone will use that, and that's all we need, and or maybe, you know, a few of them will compete, whatever, right? Clearly, that's not how things played out. We ended up with billions of computers. We have computers in our pockets, on our laptops, you know, on our desks, etc. And they're all different, and the users are sovereign over their devices. They control them, they own them. You know, obviously, with some nuance, we're not as sovereign as we'd like, I guess. But then they're all interoperable through a common shared internet protocol like TCP, and that's exactly the vision and the understanding behind Cosmos. That again, there will be many of these blockchains, just like there are many computers, and we'll build a standard interoperability protocol for them to communicate with each other.
That's exactly also the whole ideology that resonates a lot with me, because I think especially over the past year and a half, 2 years, I think we've seen more and more chain maximalism, right? Obviously, we have the Bitcoin maxis. Now we have also more and more Ethereum maxis. Now that Cardano is slowly coming up with something, you also have Cardano maxis, right? How was it actually back then in 2014, 15, 16? Was it already, this maximalist environment, or is it just?
Yeah, it might have been worse.
Wow.
Well, because maybe in 2013, Vlad and I were Bitcoin maxis, like.
I mean, but there were not too many coins out there, right? Not too many projects.
There were. I mean, back in 2013, there were a lot of coins already. They weren't very innovative, but there were. There was this BTCE, I think, was the exchange back then, and there must have been hundreds of coins listed on that thing. Feather coin and PP coin, and all these random old coins that people were trading. And it was the same kind of crap, like shit. I wrote a song in 2014 called "It's a Scam Train." To the tune of April Wine's Fast Train, talking about how all these coins are launching and they're all scams. And this was 2014, right? So very little has changed. Now we have new names. It's DeFi. All the coins are built on Ethereum or proof of stake or whatever. But, there's nothing really new under the sun.
Yeah, but I think obviously 95 to 97% are pointless, worthless, don't add any value to the ecosystem. But even if you would say 2 or 3% of the coins of the projects out there are genuine, are innovative, are trying to build new things, right? We have seen Aave has come forth with breakthrough things in the lending protocol,
sure.
Compound and all these kind of things. That still leaves us with hundreds of protocols that are actually good, right? And
sure.
I think a lot of them are also in the Cosmos ecosystem. So I can't even keep track anymore how many solid, great projects are out there. They're trying to build cool things, right, in different niches. So application-specific chains and products. So I think that's really, really cool. And that's where we're headed. Like you're saying, this multi-chain ecosystem, multi-chain future. But let's talk about the origin and the kind of like establishment of Cosmos itself. You already said you kind of like met Jay after he already has been working on Tendermint. So how did you guys meet? What was your kind of relationship, and how and when did you decide to build Cosmos?
Yeah, so there was a research group got started. I think it was on Slack or something, or email, in 2014. It was called the Cryptocurrency Research Group, and there were a lot of early proof of stake pioneers in there. So Vlad and I, and Vitalik, and Dominic, and Zaki, and Arthur from Tezos, and Nick Szabo was in there. I think Vlad pissed off Nick at some point, and so Nick kicked him out of the group, and so he had to move somewhere else to keep chatting with Vlad. So Vlad has been on a crusade against Szabo and Szabo's law and all this nonsense. But anyway, that's sort of where it started. And then there was a conference in early 2015 in Mountain View that I think was called Crypto Economicon, sort of a pun on the Cryptonomicon book. And that's when we all really met in person for the first time. Of course, the Toronto folks had known each other. We met some of the other guys, but that was the first time I met Jay in person. First time I met Zaki in person. Zaki was working on a project called SKU Chain, SKU Chain back then, so sort of like a supply chain thing. So there are a number of interesting presentations. At the time, I was working for Emeris Industries. Now that's Monax Industries. And they were really the first company to try to bring the Ethereum software to enterprise, and they knew that proof of work wasn't going to cut it, and we would need a sort of different consensus. And so I had heard about Tendermint, I think, on some podcast in late 2014. I was like, oh, this sounds really promising. It's based on academic work. I'm into that. I sort of considered myself an academic at the time. Initially we were like trying to surface all of this stuff into the Ethereum virtual machine. So we're making changes to the EVM and trying to get new opcodes in and do all this stuff. And that ended up being kind of nuts. But anyways, we met Jay in Mountain View in 2015, and him and I really hit it off. And we shared a lot of the, a lot of same values and vision around where crypto was going. And, spent a few days trying to break Tendermint and explain to him how it must be broken in this way or that way. And he kept being like, no, I thought of that. You're wrong, like this, like that. Anyway, it turns out Tendermint was broken in a very subtle way, but it would take a couple of years for Jarko, who was a researcher we ended up hiring, to discover how it was broken and to fix it. And now, as far as we know, it's been fixed for the last few years, but that's another story. So anyway, so Jay and I sort of hit it off, and then, I decided I'd spend some time working with him, and Monax was, was happy to support that. And so we spent some time working together for a few months. Basically, we started, trying to productionize Tendermint. I was the first person to really, start to try to use it besides Jay and to work on it. And one of the first things we did together was re-implemented the Ethereum virtual machine on top of Tendermint, so that we could have Ethereum smart contracts and all that as part of the Tendermint software. that work ended up getting factored out and is now part of the Hyperledger Burrow projects. That work lives on. This was from early 2015, but we sort of hit it off there in 2015, really working on this stuff. And that summer, Jay refactored quite a bit of the consensus. And then later that year, I would rewrite a big portion of the consensus as part of my master's thesis, and to make it more sort of deterministic and easier to follow the logic and so on. There's still issues there, but as far as we know, the thing works very well, and it certainly secures many billions of dollars in production now. So that's it's cool to see that code still live. But anyway, by the end of the year, Jay was like, "Hey, do you want to start a company with me, and let's like really go full force on this Tendermint thing?" And I said, "Hell yeah!" And so I joined him, and by 2016, we were trying to run this Tendermint company together and figure out how to raise money from venture capitalists who still didn't understand Bitcoin, and so certainly didn't understand proof of stake, and so that wasn't working very well. And then finally, I wrapped up my thesis in April, and then finally we were like, you know what, forget about all this venture capitalist stuff. Let's go back to our roots. Like, we want to fix real issues in the cryptocurrency community. We want to build, public money. Let's do this. Let's do a fundraiser and write a white paper and sort of do it right. And so it took a couple months of brainstorming through different ideas of what we were going to build and how we were going to leverage this amazing software we had built, Tendermint, and the application blockchain interface on top of it, and knowing about the light client proofs, and that how easy we could make it for Tendermint chains to talk to each other using the so-called sidechain technology. And so after a few iterations, we hit on the sort of structure of what is now Cosmos and the basics of IBC, and so the white paper came out that summer 2016.
Awesome. Yeah, that's really cool. And now fast forward to today, summer 2021. Is Cosmos how you envisioned it would be back then?
Yeah, I mean, I think we thought we would launch sooner. I think we thought things would move a little bit faster than they did, but pretty much everything we anticipated is happening. Back then we were trying to convince the Ethereum people that the way Ethereum was going to scale was through the same mechanisms as Cosmos. And we're seeing that play out with sort of roll-ups. And you could think about the roll-up based scaling of Ethereum as sort of application specific side chains. And, the particulars of roll-up technology weren't, we hadn't quite hit on them, but they're very, very similar to, the mechanisms of IBC. And proof of stake, certainly one. There's all the new blockchains, like you're saying, are based on proof of stake. Everything is, almost everything is in one way or another derived from Tendermint. So yeah, things are pretty much going, kind of more or less as expected in the blockchain world. In some cases, moving faster than expected, and others moving slower. But yeah, it's definitely following up. Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. I think also now, especially in the last couple of weeks, we're seeing a lot of public interest also from the crypto community, obviously, in Cosmos, to build on Cosmos. You see more and more hype kind of also building up, more content on YouTube, more Twitter content, and all those kind of things. The community is growing a lot. I think last week was the first time also that Atom has been trending on, what was it, Lunar Crash or something like that. So how do you view the Cosmos ecosystem? Is that, do you think like we could do much better already, or do you think we're perfectly on track? Obviously, Tendermint right now, the company, they have also a lot of initiatives and things in the pipeline to attract also more devs and more people to build on Cosmos. How do you view the Cosmos ecosystem right now?
It's pretty amazing. I mean, we could always do better, but I'm constantly impressed by what's out there. I mean, years ago, we put forward this vision of application-specific blockchains, which at the time, everyone was like, oh, that's stupid. You'll never be able to secure them. There's not going to be enough validators, blah, blah, blah. And sure enough, it's working. And, the people who want to free themselves from solidity and want to have real mature programming environments and sovereignty over their chains. I mean, that was really the vision of Cosmos, right? Sovereignty and interoperability. And the sovereignty piece has really proven itself out as some of the most successful chains out there. You've got, the Binance chain, Terra, Crypto.com, Thorchain, like all of these, major, what are now considered DeFi projects, essentially built themselves on the Cosmos stack. And then of course there's the Cosmos Hub, right, which is sort of slowly evolving and not really rushing things, and rightly so. So I think maybe I'm a little bit surprised at sort of how many actual huge multi-billion-dollar Cosmos-based blockchains there are now, and that some of them even have higher market caps than Atom. In some sense, it's not surprising, and others maybe it is. But I think the community is doing amazingly well. Of course, it took us a while to finally ship IBC, and the uptake is still a little bit slow. So there are a bunch of chains that have adopted it. And of course, with Osmosis launching last month, that was pretty amazing. And so that really got, kickstarted IBC transactions and getting things going there. But, once Terra adopts it and Thorchain and a few others, and there's a number of chains that are sort of gearing up for launch. The Regen network is launched, obviously. And then, there's Agoric that's coming, and the Althea network and Juno and a number of others that are sort of on the horizon. That are going to make, really bring that interoperability vision to life. And then, of course, the bridges to all the other. I think we also thought maybe we'd have more bridges sooner to some of the other networks, to Bitcoin, to Ethereum. Of course, the Gravity bridge is, coming any day now, a couple months maybe, but it's in pretty late stages of development. But there's still some kinks being worked out. So so the real interoperability is pretty much here, but still a few milestones to go. But certainly by the end of the year, I think we'll really be seeing that vision playing out.
Yeah, and I think interoperability is really also the name of the game. I think scalability, there's now so many solutions. Optimism just launched on Uniswap, or Uniswap launched on Optimism. So a lot of Ethereum-based applications, and Ethereum itself obviously are scaling right now. And I think that's great. So I think, to me at least, the next big thing that needs to be mastered is interoperability, right? Is to connect chains. And you already said bridges that are in the works, the Gravity bridge, which is built to, I think, bridge EVM-based chains, right? Like Polygon, also Ethereum itself, of course, but also Binance Smart Chain. What would you say is also the competitive edge that Cosmos has in the crypto space? I think obviously interoperability as a main topic. IBC has shipped in February this year, and maybe you can also compare to other competitors out there right now.
Sure. I mean, I think at the heart of it is our vision and values. I think that's unparalleled in the space. We've been committed the whole time to building the most useful things we can to enable communities, right? And so we often get flack for not pumping the atom enough, or not building enough game theory into the atom, or whatever, and it's like, look, we build the thing that we think is the most valuable at the time, right? And initially that was Tendermint, and then it was the Cosmos SDK, and then it was IBC, and maybe now it's actually the features around the Cosmos Hub and bringing additional utility to the atom and shared security and all these kinds of things. So, but I think really the thing that distinguishes us is that vision, this commitment to sovereignty and interoperability for years, that anyone should be able to run their own blockchain and, determine their own security requirements for themselves and put together the validator set that makes sense for them, and to still be interoperable with everyone else. And that's, we feel that way both about blockchain design, but also about socioeconomic design, right? And that's really the future of the sort of our political economic systems, is these more sort of sovereign, interoperable, call them city states or whatever you like. And I think that's the sort of world we're going to. And I see sort of a convergence between blockchain scalability and, political economics scalability, so to speak. So I think that's really the thing that distinguishes us coming out of that, from that sort of values first positioning. We've built incredibly valuable tools and software and frameworks, like the Cosmos SDK. I think is still unparalleled in terms of its usability for actually, building a blockchain application. There's really nothing like it. Obviously there's Solidity and there's Substrate and there's, many other ways to build chains, but Cosmos SDK, from what I've heard from users, is still sort of the easiest and most reliable. And we see that with, some of the most popular blockchains in the world using it to actually build their system, Terra, Binance, et cetera, et cetera. So I think those are the things that distinguish us. Obviously, IBC itself as the only real, true, generalized standard for interoperability. There's a lot of, talk and hype of interoperability, but we see, most of the solutions that are built out there are sort of ad hoc bridges that are sort of custom bespoke between two particular chains. And IBC is really the first to really make an effort to generalize and enable all the chains to speak sort of the same language and use the same protocols and the same way of reasoning about security and so on. So I think that's also, a major differentiator. And we're seeing many of the other projects, start to adopt it, where, the folks are building IBC bridge to Solana and IBC bridge to Substrate for Polkadot and to many others. So that's all clutch. And then the Cosmos Hub itself is sort of, rather than try to focus on saying, okay, everyone has to use the atom, or you have to use this thing, or, you can only get value out of the work we've done, through some kind of rent seeking, whatever. Like, no, we're not about that, right? The Cosmos Hub is going to compete on an equal footing with all these other blockchains. It is positioned for a number of reasons to deliver high value, to specialize in this sort of, interchain routing and in shared security and so on. And, there's a number of features that are coming to the Cosmos Hub over the year that the next year or so that will be shipped that, we'll sort of deliver on that vision to actually enable all these chains that are now part of this interchain ecosystem to do so much more by having a hub that specializes in servicing them. So, yeah,
it's awesome. I also made a separate video. If anybody at this point is watching this, like, man, I want to, what is this 2.0 roadmap all about? I made a video about that. Also, I think, like you were saying, the whole roadmap is also about maximizing the utility and use cases for Atom, right? And also driving the maximum value for the Cosmos Hub. So that's pretty cool. And I think also a lot of people always try to compare Polkadot to Cosmos, right? Because they also have this interoperability narrative. But I think the key difference here is also that IBC is live, right? IBC has actually shipped, it's live, it's being used. Now with Osmosis, also stress tested under real world circumstances with real users. I think they have in the first month 30,000 active users, which is crazy. So that's pretty cool. And also this chain sovereignty, I think that's also a very important thing that you pointed out, that in Cosmos, every chain is independent, right? At least initially, and later probably this year or early next year, then you can also have shared security as an option, right? I think that's also one key difference to Polkadot, for example, because on Polkadot, you're basically forced to be part of the relay chain, right? And to buy and lock up DOT, which obviously drives more value, but that's a different story. Anyway, so the competitive edge for Cosmos, I think, is clear if you also understand the whole narrative around interoperability and the importance of it.
Yeah.
What are some of the most exciting hub upgrades that, or Cosmos hub upgrades that are coming up, or some other Cosmos related, I don't know, upgrades, implementation, or projects that you think are worth mentioning?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a lot of stuff coming to the hub. I mean, so there's some work ongoing on a EIP 1559 style fee market. So, that'll also create, stronger demand for atoms if they get, assuming this all gets adopted, but obviously everything gets voted on by governance and will need to be voted in. So that's something that's under the works, and sort of more advanced fee market and stuff. There's also the DEX has launched. There isn't the front end yet, but there should be soon. So that should, the DEX has some really nice, interesting technical features in there that sort of prevent front running and some of the extraction and provide fair prices and so on. There's also a really nice feature called interchain accounts that's coming. It's very, very powerful, that basically allows you to do transactions on any blockchain from the Cosmos Hub. So without having to move your tokens over, and just being able to use like a single wallet on the Cosmos Hub to control activity, on other chains in the interchain, with the sort of notion that you'll be able to do the maximum amount of stuff with the least amount of hops by having an account on the Cosmos Hub and using interchain accounts to do whatever you want on other chains. That's going to be a very powerful feature. And then there's also shared security, of course, or what we call in Cosmos land interchain staking. Which will allow leveraging the atoms that are already staked on the Cosmos Hub to secure additional chains. And so from that perspective, we see IBC is really a building block on top of which you can build more advanced protocols like sharding and shared security and so on. And that's really what we're trying to prove out now, right? So first we did this sort of sovereign interoperable thing with a base IBC that's very generalizable and doesn't make any strong assumptions about shared security or anything like that. And then on top of that, we can build more advanced shared security protocols. And that's what we'll prove out with interchain staking and so on. So those are some of the most exciting short-term things that are coming. There's lots more planned in terms of optimization and performance and scalability, and being able to increase the 10x the size of the validators, and roll-ups and ZK roll-ups. And there's been a lot of talk about getting WASM support, smart contract support on the hub, and so on. So that's some of the things coming to the Cosmos Hub. There's a bunch of other chains in the ecosystem that are launching that are going to bring new capabilities to Cosmos. So there's the Ethermint chain, which will bring the EVM, with fast finality and so on to the Cosmos ecosystem, and then the Agoric chain, which is their own highly developed, very secure smart contract platform. It's based on JavaScript, so it'll be more accessible to sort of the masses of programmers, but it's a secure version of JavaScript, so it doesn't come with all the sort of dependency chaos that existing JavaScript has. There's projects like the Regen network and Althea and IXO that are a bit more focused on like a social impact use case. That's the stuff I'm really interested in, is actually, not just DeFi and speculation and casinos, but actually using this technology for real world important use cases to, solve really challenging global problems. And, so Regen working on regenerative agriculture, which is arguably one of the most important problems of our time. And Althea working on, the incentivized mesh nets and building cooperative ISPs essentially. And this is sort of the last mile of the decentralization narrative. We talk a lot about decentralization, but the elephant in the room is like the actual physical cables that connects us all. And that is very far from decentralized today. And so, having starting to actually be able to incentivize the development of mesh nets and other kinds of, internet connectivity, I think is going to be a big deal. And, IXO working on social impact bonds, and there are other projects working on local currencies. That's the stuff I'm really passionate about, actually using cryptocurrencies, not so much necessarily as a store of value, which is maybe a controversial thing for people to hear, but more as actually a real medium of exchange, right? To enable, small businesses to trade with each other where they otherwise wouldn't have access to liquidity. They can't get loans from the bank or whatever, but there's all these, there's all these resources and there's all these unused resources, unmet needs, and people want to trade with each other and they just don't have a medium of exchange to do it. And so using this technology to enable them to do that is something I think that holds a lot of promise. And I would encourage more people in the cryptocurrency community to look into to actually make this stuff real and to really help people.
So what are the things that you are currently working on? Because I think you're also the CEO of Informal Systems, which also came out of the Interchain Foundation research team. What are you guys working on? I think you do a bit of auditing and security things. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we do a bunch of stuff. So we have two business units. One is the security auditing. Another is the cephalopod equipment validator. So we run cephalopod equipment on the Cosmos Hub, on Regen, and on Osmosis, and soon to be on more networks. So if you're looking for a nice validator to delegate to, check out cephalopod equipment. And we've started doing audits. We take a different sort of approach to audits because sort of on the research side, we do a lot of work on formal verification. And so we've been building out formal verification tools that, we're trying to target them to be much more accessible to the average developer, to make it easier, sort of as a natural extension of your testing regime to be able to use these more advanced tools. And we've started applying those tools to our auditing work and to the Cosmos protocols and so on. We've also been doing a lot of development in Rust. So we built the main IBC relayer that's called Hermes. So a lot of the traffic that's flowing over IBC is running over, is using Hermes, which is this piece of software we built that actually relays packets between different blockchains. So Cephalopod, our validator, is running Hermes instances on every IBC supporting blockchain out there right now. And running Hermes is permissionless. So anyone can run the Hermes relayer, or there's other relayers. There's one in Go, there's one in TypeScript as well that you can check out. And anyone can run them right now and compete to relay packets between blockchains. So we do a lot of that and, a lot of debugging and, making that stuff work. We're also working on some other stuff in Rust, sort of a next generation of Tendermint, and thinking about sort of a more multi-chain native Tendermint and some of the protocol design around that, and what the next generation of software is going to look like for this multi-chain ecosystem. Because right now, like all the software we're using now was sort of envisioned 5 years ago or whatever, and now the world that we envisioned has come about, and it's maybe time for another generation of software to set us up for the next 5 years or so. So that's a bunch of the things that Informal is working on. You can check out our website, informal.systems, or on Twitter. And then on the side, I'm trying to become a monetary economist. So I'm reading a lot of books from the 19th century and early 20th century, trying to understand money and what's going on there. Yeah.
I've seen also on Twitter, I think a few days ago, you posted that you spent a few days just walking long walks through the forest and just being in nature. And I think resonating and thinking about those things and coming up with new ideas. I think in this fast moving, especially in the crypto world, a lot of people don't even have the patience to think for themselves anymore. Everybody's chasing the next 100x and million X or whatever. But I think we're still early in the sense that we still have to work and build for a couple of years, I think, before this whole space really is considered mature. But yeah, I think, I feel like we could talk on for hours about these things. But one last question before we go into the community AMAs. I collected some questions. I was really surprised. Like I got a lot of questions. What would you say are currently the main challenges that Cosmos still has over the next years to really succeed and really become one of the, I don't know, top crypto projects out there, or blockchain DLT projects out there? What are the main challenges that we still need to overcome?
Yeah, I mean, one thing I would say is the vision has succeeded, right? The vision was right. We're here, multi-chain ecosystem, application-specific blockchains, interoperability. So all that has proven itself out. And that's, you know, I think that's something we care about a lot, is getting the vision right and getting the values right, and really prioritizing sovereignty and interoperability, and you know, making sure that people understand that and care about that, and that sort of materializing. Of course, at the same time, we want to see the technology we're particularly building, and the Cosmos Hub and the Atom and all these things continue to deliver value themselves. The big challenges are you know, continuing to ship high quality software in a very competitive, fast-paced environment. You know, getting the product market fit right, lining things up time-wise with other projects that want to launch, so that, you know, shared security arrives at a time that makes sense for projects that want to launch. You know, for instance, Osmosis was like, hey, we would have launched with shared security, but you know, it's not around yet. What are you doing? So you know, things like that. So just the, you know, getting the go-to-market right, the product market fit, all these kinds of things. There's still a lot of really interesting, challenging research in that space that needs to be done. You know, scalability is by no means solved, and economics is by no means solved. So there's really still a lot of interesting work to do there. Despite the vision having succeeded, you know, there's still a lot to execute on and deliver on. So yeah, just continuing to ship, and you know, Cosmos has a quite complex, decentralized organizational structure with a lot of development teams. And so, you know, coordinating across all of those is always an interesting challenge, and will continue to be so. We've certainly gotten a lot better at it over the years. And yeah, so continuing to be able to ship and you know, organize that and keep up with the space, and continue to be basically the leader in the proof of stake interoperable blockchains.
Yeah, and I think product market fit is one thing that most crypto projects and founders forget, or simply don't care about, right? They just want to launch something and resolve problems that don't even exist yet, or that nobody even wants to, products that nobody wants to use. But interoperability, now also we've seen it with Osmosis, right? You mentioned the shared security thing. There's a lot of things that already indicate like we're on the right track, and the 2.0 roadmap is going to deliver a lot of great things that also have strong market demand. But let's get into
so let me just recommend that listeners check out those two blog posts. The Cosmos Hub is a port city, which sort of lays out the next vision for the Cosmos Hub, and then the Cosmos Hub 2.0 roadmap, which talks about in a bit more detail all the features that are coming. So those sort of lay out where the Cosmos Hub is going and why, and should give you an idea of you know, what we're up against and what the challenges for us to deliver will be. Yeah.
Awesome. So let's get into the community questions. I have 5 questions here, so we can go through them quickly. Fabian has the first question. How has the narrative of interoperability changed over the time? I guess from like 2014 to now, when you started working on it first.
Yeah, I guess it's evolved somewhat from you know, a lot of concern over the security of the different chains and reasoning about that, to, you know, so initially it was like really about side chains and the kind of Bitcoin side chains and merge mining and these sorts of things, and you know, getting to where it is now of having, you know, the sort of Cosmos notion of interoperability, of sovereign independent chains that are still able to communicate with some amount of security. I think we still, unfortunately, have a long way to go on standardizing how we reason about the security of these you know, interoperable bridges. And like I was saying, a lot of the bridges that are being built are still pretty ad hoc and bespoke, and it's difficult to reason about their security properties. And so part of the reason we've been pushing IBC so hard is because it's a, you know, it's a standard, it standardizes how you reason about security, and really helps to share common language for doing that. So yeah.
Awesome. Next question from Adriana. If you were to design Cosmos again from the beginning, what would you do different, change, or improve?
Oh man. I mean, to be honest, like some of the biggest issues we've had are organizational, and so probably we would do something different in the organizational structure. You know, things were complex and have gotten more complex over the years. So maybe, you know, a lot of our competitors have a more streamlined, you know, simpler, more centralized organizational structure. So, you know, I like
organizational because you have too many different teams working on the things, or what do you mean?
Yeah, I mean, there were some early issues in the way the companies were set up, and so there, you know, a lot of folks moved around, and so maybe having something that was a bit more democratic from the beginning. For instance, you know, having like a cooperative structure. So, Informal Systems, the company we set up, is structured as a cooperative. So it's all, I'm the CEO, but the employees can vote to kick me out at any time. So, something more sort of democratic like that might have helped, hold everyone together rather than the kind of fracturing that we've ended up happening. So there's a lot of complexity in the sort of decentralized organizational structure. I mean, on the one hand, there's the benefit in that it's incredibly decentralized and there's no, single entity that is sort of really running things. But on the other, it's, there isn't as much of a sort of unified drive to just like deliver one, roadmap or something. There's a lot more going on in that, so it's got its pros and cons, but, maybe setting up a cooperative sooner, I like to think is something we would have done. Maybe more on the tech front, which is maybe more what Adriana was getting at. We might have tried to ship shared security sooner. We might have tried to design a less complicated staking mechanism. Maybe we would use epochs. Right now, the validator set can change arbitrarily with every block, and that introduced quite a bit of complexity. Whereas we're probably going to move to an epoch-based system soon, because that'll simplify, a number of things that are coming down the pike, like staking derivatives and interchain staking and a number of other things. So maybe some simplifications there, and probably, trying to ship shared security sooner or focus on that rather than some of the other things. Yeah.
I think when Vitalik was asked this question, his answer was his only regret is that he shipped Ethereum too fast because he had this external pressure, to launch it, and now basically he has to kind of like rebuild Ethereum 2.0.
Yeah, that is not how it felt at the time. Let me tell you, waiting for Ethereum to launch, like back in the
I mean, that's also the struggle, right? You've seen it also with Torchain. Everybody's now finger pointing at Torchain, but weeks before, everybody was saying like, "Oh my God, when are they launching? They haven't launched anything yet, right?" So, at one hand, you have this external pressure and noise also from the community, right? They want high yields, they want to farm, right? They want to make money, and then you have the code security, which takes time and to mature and to stress test, and all these kind of things. So I think the line in between where you have the perfect launch is very, very thin, and I think it's really hard to hit that. But
yeah,
I mean,
still, I think Ethereum did a pretty amazing job, and they ship, they launched with multiple clients and so on. And it took a while, and now there's a lot of technical debt they need to deal with, but they've managed to do a bunch of hard forks, and so same with us.
So Rowan has the next question: is there anything in the Cosmos ecosystem that you dislike, and how would you go about fixing it?
Binance, can I say that? Yeah, I mean, Binance is the top validator on the hub, and they don't do shit. So
that's true.
I mean, they've maybe contributed a bit of code in the past, but like they're pretty slow for upgrades. They have way too much voting power. They're serious risk. They used the software and they built their own thing, and they're competing with everyone else. And I mean, good for them. It's like, it's nice because we can say, oh, there's like $50 billion worth of value on Cosmos chains, and a big, like 90% of that is because of Binance or something, or 80% or something. So, but I'm not a big fan of like centralized casinos. So, and I don't like the role they're playing in the validator set. So if they were more active, if they were more involved, voting on proposals and doing their upgrades quickly and so on, maybe it'd be a different story. But that's the main thing that sticks out to me. But anyway, we're going to ship. Staking derivatives are going to ship, and that'll really change the nature of the game. People will be able to have liquid atoms directly on the hub and still have them staked, and I think that'll change a lot. And there's also a lot of regulatory pressure on Binance now, so we'll see how that shapes out
with other things.
Yeah, but if you're delegated to Binance, you should absolutely redelegate to Cephalopod.
And in any case, you should always withdraw your funds from centralized exchanges. I've done it over the past couple of weeks. I usually always have most of my funds in self-custody, right? And now, since I'm like more into all Cosmos projects, and actually Kepler is amazing. You can store different coins there, different chains. So it makes sense. And you can directly stake them, directly participate in governance, right? So take your funds off Binance, especially now with the recent regulatory challenges that they're facing. But I think it's funny because like I remember like 2 years ago or something, CZ was tweeting about great technology is going to win and we're going to list Atom even though they never reached out to us or something like that. And then they somehow stopped talking about it and supporting it, even though I think the Binance chain is even built on Cosmos, right? So, but anyway, that's what it is. CZ, if you're watching this,
Yeah.
Get active.
Increase your commission and, you know, be a better participant in in the community. Yeah.
And also implement IBC, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway, next question from JD Romero. How is the Cosmos ecosystem going to continue flourishing with competition like the Polkadot ecosystem that are also trying to become the internet of blockchains?
I mean, you know, it's a rising tide lifts all boat. I don't think there's a, you know, it's really about competition. There's different, you know, different technology stacks, different values and visions. And certainly, you know, we've always said if we both build the internet of blockchains and they don't talk to each other, then we both failed, right? So there's ongoing efforts to build IBC into Substrate, to connect Substrate chains into this internet of blockchains. You know, from my understanding, a lot of what Polkadot ecosystem is focused on is really around the relay chain, either on Kusama or on Polkadot, and, you know, bidding for slots there, and that sort of, you know, kind of sharding solution, which is very different than what Cosmos is proposing in terms of fully sovereign, independent, heterogeneous, interoperable zones. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I think yeah, that's also the whole point of it, right? To connect also interoperability projects to each other, because then you can leverage it, right? And now when Terra is going to implement IBC, I think it's already in the works. They bring over everything that's built on top of them, right? Anchor, mirror, everything.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah. I think, you know, so with I mean, and the other thing is with the Cosmos Hub, and the Cosmos Hub is going to be, you know, if you read those blog posts, you'll see it's going to be designed to really specialize in servicing the many blockchains in the interchain, and really being a conduit for them and a service provider for them and a router and so on. So that's really you know, different from, you know, the Polkadot relay chain is really specifically to coordinating the parachains that are responded to or whatever. And so they're very different projects coming at it from different angles, but I think working towards similar goals. Yeah.
All right, and then the last question, which actually was kind of a discussion that we had in our, I have a Telegram group there, and I just started it and wanted to connect with people, and now there's almost 400 people in it, and most of them are cosmonauts. So we talk a lot about Cosmos. And, since a few days, we have these discussions about the inflation of Atom. Right. So can you talk about that? Because it's a dynamic inflation that readjusts itself according to how much percentage of is staked, right?
Yeah. So we had the right idea to make the inflation rate dynamic so that it would respond to the amount staked, so that as people unstake to take advantage of other opportunities, whatever they might be, in DeFi or so on, the inflation rate would go up to incentivize people to restake. And so right now, all of this stuff is parameterizable by governance. I think the min and the max are 7 and 20%, something like that. And then the threshold is 66%. So if it's above, if staking is above 66%, the inflation drops towards 7. If it's below, it increases to 20. And we actually, there was just a vote, I think a month or two ago, to change the rate, to increase the rate at which the inflation rate adjusts, so that it would respond sort of more quickly, which is going to be important as, you know, people unbond to participate in the DEX and so on. So the inflation will be, I mean, it's never going to be competitive with, you know, 2000% APY or whatever, but obviously those kinds of yields don't last. So I think, you know, getting up to 20%, it would probably be quite competitive. And of course, it's likely to be a lot more safe than LPing in many respects, and not as volatile and so on. So that's the idea. And that may become more intelligent over time, have more of like a, you know, control theory based design in there. Right now, it's a very simple kind of dynamic mechanism, but yeah.
Yeah, I think just a lot of people get heart attacks when they hear, oh my God, this coin has an inflation, right? But I think inflation itself is not really the enemy, especially in proof of stake chains, because you have to somehow provide incentives for people to stake and secure the network, right?
Sure.
So
I mean, and I can imagine that, you know, at some point the Atom holders will vote to change it so it's not you know, exponential anymore, and that it's just a fixed amount, like in Ethereum, you know, 10 atoms block or whatever the case may be. So that's certainly in the cards, and, you know, certainly once we have a fee burning mechanism like EIP 1.519 in there, that would be you know, have some deflationary aspect and so on. So there's, you know, the inflation is right now is really just a kind of bootstrap mechanism, and that could actually change, and it's up to the Atom holders to do that. So
yeah, and I also love the governance model in Cosmos. I think it's one of the most used ones out there. The community is actually voting on big things out there. So if you hold Atom, first get them off Binance and Kraken, and second, use the governance model, because
and hopefully everyone learned their lesson with the osmosis airdrop, right? Because if your coins were on Binance, you did not get any Osmo out of that. So it's very likely there's going to be more airdrops in the future, and the only way you're going to get them is if you custody the coins yourself and stake them to the validators of your choice. So. Yeah.
I was lucky because 2 weeks before the airdrop, I think it was February 18th when the snapshot was taken, was really when I started to dig deep into Cosmos, and got Jack Sample on my channel, and he told me, we talked about this osmosis potential airdrop one day, and I told everybody get your funds off the exchanges, and so they got good airdrops there. One final thing, this also is a question that I have. What are your thoughts on Emeris, which is going live? I hope this month still. It's only a couple of days left. And also, do they have, that's a question I get a lot of times, do they have fiat gateways? I think John confirmed it with me, but I would just double check with you. Is there fiat gateways planned? Or
I don't have answers to these questions. You'd have to ask Peng or people at Inc. But it looks awesome, the previews and stuff. So I'm pretty excited about it, and having a really well fleshed out front end. I mean, I was hacking on a front end for the Gravity Dex a couple months ago for the CoinDesk demo. So, bharvest had built a front end for the testnet competition they did, the incentivized testnet a few months ago. And so I sort of took that and added IBC support, initial IBC support to it, and did a fun demo. But to have a real professional design team, and I think it's pretty clear, to anyone who looks, that the design team at Tendermint Inc. is just the best in the business. Like, they're just incredible what the designs they produce. So to have them really dedicated to building a front end for all of DeFi and for the whole Cosmos ecosystem, and they're they announce every day or two that they're support for another chain. So I'm really looking forward to the launch of that thing. Certainly can't come soon enough, but we also don't want to rush them. So
sure. And we've learned, I think, from the history that it's better to not rush those things. I mean, if it's 1 or 2 weeks more, it doesn't really matter.
I mean, Cosmos has a long history of shipping slowly, but shipping right, So we put their time. It's always late. It's always 2 months away or whatever. But when we ship, it's good. So, yeah.
Awesome. Well, man, thanks so much for your time and all your inputs and insights. It was really, really valuable. I think I learned a lot. We all learned a lot. So thanks. Would love to have you on in, I don't know, a couple of months again. I'm sure there's so many more things to talk about. So yeah, thanks again for coming on, and we'll keep in touch.
Thanks a lot, man. Yeah, it's been great. Coming out. Yeah.
Sure, man.
Take care.